Hello, everyone. I'm Al. I'm a senior undergraduate student at Rice. I'm from Hassan College, and I'm studying computer science and also minoring in data science. And I am the co-president of the Rice CS Club. So before we start our panel, I would like every single panelist to introduce themselves. So we can start with Natalie. Can you tell us about yourself and talk about your current role?
Hi, my name is Natalie Berestowski. I graduated from Rice with my PhD in 2013. And my advisor was Loai Naklich, who's currently the Dean of Engineering. I'm currently working as a director of AI team at a company called Bill.com. We're a fintech company based in California and provide a back office solution and process payments for small businesses. I've been there for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was in the oil and gas industry here in Houston. So my team primarily focuses on ML solutions for Bill.com. So our core product is called IVA, it stands for Intelligent Virtual Assistant, which essentially helps our users with data entry. We use NLP and computer vision to extract important information off the invoices that upload. And instead of doing manual data entry, they just validate what our AI recognized on the bill. And it really saves them a lot of time.
Thank you. That's awesome. Now can we hear more about Rushi?
Hi, my name is Rushi Balani. I graduated 2 years back in 2019. I was at Baker College, a computer science major, and I am now at a startup based out of Denver called Bigger Pockets. It basically is a company that has a number of different media products that teaches people how to invest in real estate. And my current role is a business analyst where I operate at the intersection of analytics, product management, and strategy. So I wear a lot of different hats around the company. And do a lot of data analytics, which is where my computer science background comes in, but also a lot of other business facing functions.
Thank you. Mary Rose?
Hi, Mary Rose Martinez. I graduated Rice last century. That was 1993. I work at Halliburton, which is one of the largest energy services company in the world. We operate in over 70 countries. I'm currently the chief information security officer, which means I'm responsible for global cybersecurity for the company.
That's awesome. Thank you. Now I'd like to talk about, or for us to talk about your time at Rice. So my first question is, what were some of the most formative experiences you had at Rice that helped you advance in your career? And we can start with Mary Rose Martinez this time.
Probably one of the biggest things was the ability. I went to Rice as a master's student, and it was really the learn how to learn. And here's one example. I actually had a programming languages class. First assignment, my professor at the time, Matthias Feleisen, says, here's the first assignment, do it in Lisp. And I go up to him after class and said, again, first semester, first class, I don't know Lisp. He says, here's a book. The assignment is due next week. And I look at, you're just expected to learn. So you basically learn how to learn is something that I definitely learned at Rice. The book, understandably so, was one authored by himself. So that was just quite a great experience. But that was one of the things I learned is you just got to pick up the tools. These are just tools. And that formed my thinking, changed the way I thought about learning.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to echo on that as well. It was my biggest formative experience. Being a PhD student, I definitely learned how to be kind of independent in my work, shape my own projects. Coming out of UT with an undergraduate degree, I was, a good programmer, but very much done, I'll get it done. But at Rice, it was really about shaping your own project, shaping your path through the degree. And Rice definitely taught me that, which is very helpful in my current role as well.
Or should you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say some of my formative experiences, maybe more so outside of the realm of academics, were spending a lot of time in the student association and around Baker College. And I think a lot of the things I did there taught me how to basically balance different perspectives, integrate yourself in a community, build community. But I think no matter what type of career you go to, it's very important to see where other people are coming from and be able to balance, the different interests of different people around the company, for example. So I think I got a lot of experience doing that at Rice.
It seems like all of you have faced some challenges during your education at Rice. So my question is, when you were at Rice, what resources did you find the most helpful to navigate through the challenges? And we can start with Rishi.
Yeah, so I used a lot of resources during my time as a student, even just up until recently, and definitely used the CCD a lot. And basically the Dover Institute I found very helpful in my latter part of being an undergraduate. But I'd say above all else, I would definitely look to your friends for help. I made a lot of lifelong friends at Rice, and I think those connections are still very helpful even today. But even back then, just having people to give you mock interviews or referrals to other companies, definitely reach out to the alumni network. I think that's something that I wish I'd done more as an undergraduate. But the Rice Alumni Network and student body is very tight knit, and I would definitely use that to your advantage.
Thank you.
But as a PhD student, actually, most of my resources were kind of within the CS department, but one of the ones that I benefited from was the gym. They just built a new one at the time where I was at school, and it was a really good resource for me to keep me going through the PhD.
Yeah, as a master's student, it's a little different, right? So my duration at Rice is shorter, and obviously it's not as in-depth as in terms of being involved in community life, of student life. It's a little bit different, but certainly keeping in touch. My peers are certainly ones that I have relied upon. Close to 30 years later, we're still in touch.
Tangential to this question, what is something you wish you had known while in college?
Well, there are lots of things that you don't know when you're in college. At least I've learned in the decades since. Probably one of the things, and maybe because I'm just a student of it, for the last few decades, I've been a student of it, is really just productivity skills. Basically how to best invest your time, because it is an investment and there's so very little of it. So, I mean, beyond just plain organization, but really how to properly just be more productive and efficient and effective in terms of how you spend your time.
Yeah, I think for me, I think as a Rice student, it's always hard to balance. There's a spectrum where you feel like you're racing a lot of time, but at the other end of the spectrum, you feel like you're not doing enough sometimes. And I wish I had known that being more open-minded about what your future may entail may just ease your anxiety if you have any. Life may not always work out in terms of what jobs you get after graduation or want, but everything really works out in the end. And I think having faith in that is something I could have, tried a little bit harder as a student.
For me, it was really around kind of learning how to deal with unknowns. Going through the undergrad, it's always been, you get through, your semester starts, you take your classes, semester ends. You kind of know what's going to happen to you in the next 4 months, right? With the PhD, it was kind of an introduction to what the unknown feels like. With the PhD, you don't know whether it's going to take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years. So you're kind of facing that unknown and how long will this journey be? But then once you get into the real world, it is one big unknown. You don't know what your career is going to turn out to be. So, and it was a slow progression for me, where Rice was that pivot point from going through very organized semesters to something that's a little bit more ambiguous to, real life, which is now. And plus the recent events with COVID and everything that introduced a lot of unknowns in people's lives. But that's kind of what it was for me.
Yeah, it's funny because I also recently joined Maclay's group on bioinformatics, and the problem of unknown is a big issue for me right now as well. So I guess we can transition from your time at Rice into your career. So you all briefly introduced yourselves and talked about your role. If possible, could you explain more about your day-to-day routines and what trajectory or decision process you went through to get there? And we can start with Natalie, if that's okay.
Okay, so actually, when I got accepted into Rice PhD program, it was not to work on bioinformatics with Lua. It was I was working on a microarchitecture problems. I did undergraduate research in the realm of microarchitecture, like working on low-level languages, and I thought this is what I'm going to continue with. So that's what I got accepted to Rice for. But then I ended up sitting next to Lua in one of the lunches during a student visitation day prior to accepting. And he started telling me about the research in bioinformatics that he was doing. And I was just so fascinated that at that point, I decided that this is what I want to do. It was all about, the way I saw microarchitecture was computer for computers, it was essentially just in the realm of computers. But with bioinformatics, I saw that as me using my knowledge of computer science to help other scientists, being, scientists at MD Anderson, who I mainly work with. And that was just so fascinating to me right there. And then I knew, like, this is definitely what I want to do. This one conversation just completely changed the trajectory right there and then. And then, I ended up staying in Houston due to, family circumstances and everything, which really limited my ability to go into tech with what I can offer after my PhD, right? Because most of the tech doesn't exist in Houston. So I ended up going to oil and gas industry, but I did find satisfaction, and because it was just continuing on with the idea of using my computer science knowledge to help other scientists. So this is what allowed me to really enjoy my work in oil and gas, because I used my knowledge of computer science to help geoscientists and engineers to solve their problems. So essentially, when the data science and AI picked up in oil and gas, I fit right into that space. And then, I did get lucky when, although I couldn't go to tech in California, tech came to me when Bill.com opened offices in Houston. And it was a good pivot point for me as well to actually go into tech in this role. So I'm really enjoying my current work now, really applying my knowledge of computer science, but again, helping people, because while we are a tech company, at the core of our values is helping those end users, their accountants and small businesses, to get their work done.
Thank you. That's a journey. Ruth, you also had an unconventional path after graduating. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I probably realized by sophomore and junior year that I wasn't too interested in being a software engineer. And given some of my extracurriculars I mentioned around Rice, I really wanted to be at the intersection of business and technology. So basically started off with doing an internship at Capital One before my senior year. And that naturally led me to getting into strategy consulting upon graduation. So I spent about 1.5 to 2 years after graduating at Accenture Strategy, much of it during the pandemic, and did not have the greatest of experiences, honestly. So wanted to get back to a bit of what I'd experienced at Capital One. And that's how I landed my job that I have right now. Started about 6 months back at the startup. And my day-to-day there is a combination of doing some of the similar strategy work I did as a consultant, but also product management and data analytics. So on a day-to-day basis, I could be doing a number of different things, ranging from combining SQL databases and analyzing them, building Tableau dashboards, tracking KPIs, trying to productize different ideas around the company, market sizing, some more strategic stuff like that. But that's basically how my path has ended up so far.
Thank you.
So I've been in oil and gas essentially since I left Rice. So that's 28 years with Shell the first 4 years, and then Halliburton thereafter. Started my career as a software engineer, so really put that computer science degree to use. So I did that for maybe about 6 years, but since then I've just gone through many different role changes, essentially within Halliburton. My running joke actually in Halliburton is I can't seem to keep a job because they keep moving me every 2 or 3 years to the next role, but the role doesn't necessarily have to stay within IT. So I've been in R&D, I've been in marketing, I've been in IT, et cetera. My current role, like I mentioned, is I am the a CISO for Halliburton. So there is no normal day for me. My normal day can be from responding to a cybersecurity incident to working with folks at the World Economic Forum, to reporting to the board, to just reading reports, to, I mean, it's just a variety of things. But I am responsible for everything from the strategic development, execution, and security operations for the company.
I have one more question about this topic. What was one challenge that you faced after graduating Rice? I can give you a couple of seconds to think about it. This is a big question, but if anyone has an answer, we can start.
You said a challenge after graduating from Rice, correct?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that you had after graduating from Rice.
Yeah, I can start off. I think for me, I'm still kind of undergoing it, is just knowing what I want to do with my life, since I'm still only 2 years out of Rice. And honestly, did not have a great idea as a student of what I want to do long term, and still do not. Trying to just experiment with different things. And I think another challenge is just the pandemic in general. You know, as I mentioned, my first job, I had about 6 months of relative normal of what that job would have looked like. And then about 1 year of COVID-19, you know, working from home. And as a consultant, that just didn't really make sense because that's not how consultants really work. And I think just, you know, going with the punches in a manner of speaking was kind of something I had to open my eyes up to and do as much as I could to basically put myself in situations that I actually enjoyed working in. And that's still something I'm learning how to do, as I said.
I can go next.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Okay, so so for me, it was like two things. So the first one is around being able to really realize myself and my computer science degree from Rice in the Houston area, right? So, you know, I knew that the biggest industry is oil and gas, and that's kind of where I ended up. But it was really about forming my own path in these companies and to be able to find work where I can really apply my PhD in computer science. And I think I was pretty successful at it, you know, really getting into the data science space and being in the groups that are really leading that space within oil and gas companies. So, and the second one is deep learning. So, you know, as you know, in the area of AI, deep learning, convolutional neural networks, it's the big thing. And, you know, a few years ago, here I was a PhD, CS major from Rice, having no prior experience with deep learning, because at the time it wasn't a thing and it wasn't something that was heavily educated. We had classes in it at Rice. So I used that skill that Rice taught me about learning on my own to pick up that skill. But now, obviously, it's great to see that Rice is really staying up to date with all the latest and greatest. The students from Rice are coming out, you know, knowing how to write a CNN and, you know, use all these technologies.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so much as challenges, but I'd like to talk about two essential shifts that I've had to make throughout my career. So one was, as a computer science major, I'm used to bits and bytes, right? Black and white. Everything's very defined, contained. It's a problem we need to solve. We get after it. You know, we do it. One of the shifts I've had to make is get comfortable in the gray. It's not just black and white, but get comfortable in the gray, because there's more gray than there is black and white. And what I found that I love is actually taking that gray area and making it defined. So there's a way to actually use your computer science degree and the logical analytic brain that we have as part of computer science to actually make sense out of something. And it doesn't have to be a program, right? It could be development of a strategy. It could be some of these things which are very nebulous that you can basically confine. So that's one, moving from black to white to gray and getting comfortable with that. The other piece is, again, as I move through my career, is getting comfortable with moving from an individual contributor to being a leader of a team. And that's another shift. And again, this is not specific to computer science work per se, but it's more of just a career shift that I've had to make. As an individual contributor, you can measure what you deliver, right? There's an actual measurement. When you're a leader of a team, you don't have necessarily tangible, specific things that you're delivering that I can say, you know, I wrote X amount of code today or whatever else, right? Or I delivered this program today, et cetera. It's not that tangible, especially as you continue and progress throughout your career. Where you will have to derive success or measure success from is in the delivery of your entire team and whether you're able to essentially have your team produce more than it's capable of doing individually. Those are the two shifts I've had to make.
Thank you. These are really good. I had a question to Natalie specifically because she did a PhD with Blueye. We have a question from the audience actually. How can we get research opportunities if we don't have much prior experience? This could be both as from your undergraduate experience at UT Austin or your graduate experience here at Rice.
I think you just have to ask. I mean, that's what happened to me at UT Austin. I ended up going to office hours and for the microarchitecture professor. And he told me about his research and I asked whether I can participate in some way, shape or form. You know, apparently those sometimes even can be paid, depends on the funding the professor has. But yeah, so and when I was a graduate student at Rice, I also had an undergraduate research assistant. So most professors, they would be open as long as they can see somebody who is, you know, willing to do that and really wants to be involved because that really opens the doors for them later for graduate degrees as well.
Thank you. And to finish off the segment about your career, one last question I have is that most of us are undergrads, either sophomore, junior, seniors, and we're all deciding our career path. So what advices do you have for us when we're trying to decide a career path? And we can start with Mary Rose Martinez, if that's okay.
Keep an open mind. Like I said, I started as a software engineer. Like I said, I've even done marketing. I've done all kinds of things. Every position has allowed me to get a different perspective, learn a different skill set, add that to my toolbox and better round me out for the next role. And what I've found is that, yeah, keep an open mind, because you don't know where it's going to necessarily take you. You might think you want to be in this spot for in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It changes quickly, right? If you think about the pace of it with which technology is innovation, the innovation of technology and adoption, it can go many, many different ways. So I would say keep an open mind.
For me, I think one of the advice that I want to give is like never stop learning. So in every job that I've had, my goal was really about, am I still learning in this job? And then when I stop and start going in autopilot, that's when things just starting to be not as exciting. So, you know, never stop learning. And then the second one is around, you know, it's always makes sense to see a career kind of progressing up in terms of, you know, responsibilities and the type of leadership that you get to. But, you know, it's important to master your craftsmanship before you move into leadership, because it will eventually make you a good leader. So, you know, don't be in a rush, really master your field before, you know, taking these next steps as well.
Yeah, and I would just echo exactly what Mary Rose said about keeping an open mind. And don't put too much pressure on yourself to know what you want to do in the long term. I would really ask yourself, what do you want to do next? And try it out. If you don't like it, you can always try and do something different. It's really not as hard to change what you do as I think people in general may make it out to seem. So, you know, just have an idea of what you think you want to do and try it out. And it will always add to your toolbox. You will never waste time doing something, even if you did not enjoy it. I think it will always make you better professionally and personally, as Mary Rose said.
Awesome, thank you. The last segment I have is about staying connected with Rice and life after Rice in general, and some tips that you may have, additional tips you may have for us. My first question is, how have you stayed connected and involved with the Rice Alumni Network?
Well, for me, you know, Blueye is a busy guy, but I still try to meet him for lunch at least once a year, if not twice. So, and, you know, I am the one who's reaching out and really trying to fit into his schedule. And then I'm also involved with the Rice Data Science Conference through Ken Kennedy Institute. And that really gives me a good, strong connection at Rice. And not to mention that we actively recruit from Rice all the time.
Rishi or Mary Rose?
I'm ashamed to say that I have not kept at all with staying connected with Rice. Again, my only excuse is I'm a master. I was only a master's student there. But this is the first outreach I think that the alumni office has reached out to me, and I obviously grabbed it because Rice has done so much for me. I welcome the opportunity to stay engaged.
Thank you for being here.
I've been lucky to be able to stay in Houston after graduating. So I have tried to just keep up in a number of different ways. One is, as Natalie said, I still try and get meals with some of my closest professors. I have not been able to do that in recent times because of the pandemic, but definitely look forward to continuing to do that in the future. Keeping up with my friends around town, of course, as I mentioned. I am also on the Rice Engineering Alumni Board. So that's a great way to get involved in the next 1 or 2 years if you're at all interested and give back to the engineering school. I every year basically interview high school students when they apply to Rice through the alumni of the ARA Association of Rice Alumni and RAVA. They basically help organize all of the alumni interviewers if you want to do that. So I think those are all great ways of staying connected.
Awesome. We have a question for Mary Rose from the audience. The question is, marketing is an unusual path for a CS student. What marketing role did Mary Rose have?
So I was tapped to take over Halliburton.com, which is essentially our external website. Essentially is what they did. It was part of a rotation. They just literally, my career is this. They tap me on the shoulder. Hey, Mary Rose, you'd like to do this. I'm like, I know nothing about it. I'm in. That's pretty much my response. Tying back to the learning all the time. So I was actually responsible for Halliburton.com. But again, I'm going to go into a little bit of advice here. I always try to live or leave every role that I have better than how I found it. So it was a web marketing manager position. I left it, it became a digital marketing group. So I added search marketing, social media marketing. I just kind of expanded it. And it was basically everything, all things digital marketing. What I learned from that, though, in addition to, color schemes and things of that nature, was your user base and how you understand your users, which is applicable whether you're dealing with writing programs for a given user base, or whether you're dealing with just people in general, because you're having to communicate to stakeholders. So that was a big learning for me from a marketing perspective and helped me understand as well the rest of our business. But yeah, it was a very good role that I had. I learned a lot.
Thank you. This is amazing. My next question is, what are some tips for networking for job opportunities, especially during this time where many events are held virtually?
I can start. I get invited to so many. I would suggest that you be selective about which ones you go to, and also do the ones that have defined value for you and the ones that are smaller groups. So the ones that allow you for breakout sessions, et cetera. Especially in the virtual world, the mass like groups of people does not really allow you to do proper networking. If you were in the physical world, you would do these drive-bys, you'd be standing, talking to a person, et cetera. That's not necessarily possible in the virtual world. So anything to allow for breakout sessions, groups, smaller and more intimate, as well as very defined topics, that would be what I would suggest.
Rushi?
I think building off of that, in terms of just applying for jobs, if you're talking about networking in that sense, I think it's always very important to get referrals from people. And in general, I think, as I said before, just use the Rice Alumni Network. If you ever see anyone on LinkedIn that looks interesting, whether you want to work at their company or just learn more about what they want to do, never be scared to just send an invite, attach a note saying you want to just, grab a half an hour, talk to them about their job and career. And I think a lot of people are much more willing to do that than students may realize. And it does take a bit of social anxiety to get over in the beginning, but I think it can pay off in many different ways.
Natalie?
Well, just echo to all of this. I do find a lot of value in like one-to-one interaction. I recently did some recruiting events at Rice, and it was structured such that it was one-to-one interactions between students and the recruiters. And even in my case, when I started Build.com, I worked there for 3 months before we went remote, and I used that. I actually had to go out of my way to schedule one-to-one meetings to get to know people in the place of kind of the chats by the coffee machine. So you just have to be more proactive to reach out and have these conversations and try to get one-on-one time than in the past where you could have just, crossed paths accidentally somewhere with individuals.
Thank you. We're going to transition to breakout rooms in a bit, but before we do that, I have one last question, and I would appreciate if we can make this a bit fast so that we have time for one-on-one sessions in the breakout rooms. And my last question is, hopefully we can end it on a positive note. In these uncertain times right now, what words of encouragement or advice you may have for everyone on how to approach this time with confidence and resilience? And also, if you have final remarks, this is like a perfect time for that as well.
So for me, it's, when I end up in these times when you face uncertainty, and that first one for me was my PhD versus kind of a structured semester approach in undergrad, I always think of it in terms of taking it one day at a time. So every day that goes by, I'm one day closer to when that uncertainty is gone, to where things are back to normal or where PhD is done. So my advice is just, take it one day at a time, try to make the best of it, and eventually you will have that certainty, and you're going to be one day closer to it every day.
I would say sorry.
You can go ahead, Rushi. Sorry.
I would say something I just echoed before, which is have faith that it will all work out, and just take care of yourself. I think your mind, body, spirit, career, there are many aspects of life beyond just your job, and make sure you're hanging out with friends and doing whatever else you need, exercising, all of that, to take care of yourself as a holistic human being, and keeping up with the professional goals, of course, but not putting too much pressure on yourself during these times, especially because it all will work out.
If I might borrow from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, he talks about a concentric circle. So you have the circle of control, out of that circle of influence, and outside of that circle of concern. Focus on your circle of control, what you can control. Expand your circle of influence, and don't worry about the circle of concern. There's not much you can do about it. So that's would be my advice.
Thank you, all of you, for coming today, and it was a pleasure getting to know you. And for the next segue, next